Welcome to the BioMedWire Podcast, powered by IBN. This original audio production delivers market and sector insights, as well as exclusive interviews with innovative executives shaping the future in fast-moving industries, and may feature a client partner of IBN or one of the 60-plus investor-focused brands within IBN's dynamic brand portfolio. As a multifaceted financial news and publishing company, IBN leverages its extensive distribution network, utilizing multiple proprietary corporate communication tools to introduce both public and private companies to a vast and diverse audience of investors, consumers, influencers, journalists, and other targeted segments of the public. IBN may have received compensation to produce this audio content. Please be sure to read IBN's entire disclaimers for full disclosures. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the next revelatory episode of IBN's BioMedWire Podcast.
Welcome back, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us here today at the Investor Brand Network. And we join here a podcast on the AI Newswire because today we are speaking with Lantern Pharma Incorporated. The company's traded on the NASDAQ under the ticker symbol LTRN. I want you to go to their beautiful website. That's lanternpharma.com. And of course, visit us here at the Investor Brand Network. Just click on the Clients tab. There in alphabetical order, you're going to find Lantern Pharmaceutical, which is a client stage biotechnology company leveraging artificial intelligence and machine learning to redefine oncology drug development. And we are joined today by the President, Chief Executive Officer, and Director for the company. And that's none other than Panna Sharma. Panna, thanks so much for making time for us today. And welcome to the Investor Brand Network.
Stuart, thanks for having me on. Look forward to our talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Today, we're going to focus on the achievements of the company and how you leverage AI. And so specifically, if we could start with sort of the building blocks of your company, the fundamental business markets that you operate in. We just talked about you being a clinical stage biotechnology company focused in oncology, but we want to learn about your AI-driven RADR product as well as the other products within your portfolio as well, Panna. So the call is yours. Tell us about your company.
Yeah, we really like to think of ourselves as an AI-first company, but our focus is like many AIs. We're trying to do AI for good. Our good is actually to create cancer medicines. So the problem that we're trying to solve for is a massive problem globally. There's about $250 billion a year spent on the research and development into new cancer medicines. And unfortunately, it takes 10 to 12 years to go from an idea to an actually approved drug, and 93% of them fail in oncology. So over a decade, high failure rates, billions of dollars. To me, this is a perfect problem area for top cancer minds to try to use AI and big data and computational biology to solve this. And that's what our team does. Our team is maniacally focused on not just using AI, but really driving AI first. We've created computational models from the ground up to focus on different types of cancers, but also to focus on the mechanisms of cancer. And these are things that 3 years ago and 5 years ago were just being dreamt about. Myself personally, I actually studied AI in college for several years. And today, the things that you can do on simple things like a phone are 100 times more powerful than we could do in massive Unix labs. And so imagine now the problem we're trying to solve is, we're not trying to create chatbots. We're not trying to tell you what to do on social media. We're not trying to write research papers for students. We're focused on a big, devastating global problem. Cancer rates are rising. Drugs are not keeping up. The gap is getting wider and wider. And scientifically, there's so much data and there's so much information. And so how can we capture all of that and then create models that are constantly learning? And how do we create systems that are constantly capturing this data so that it's not in the purview of just a handful of people at Stanford or Harvard or MIT or University of Florida, University of Texas, all these pockets of excellence. Imagine now being able to aggregate all that constantly, 24 hours a day, and then be able to have models compete to figure out different kinds of questions that you have. And that's exactly what we've done. We've used this wonderful thing called AI that continues to grow, but solving a problem around creating cancer medicines. And we have 3 of those today that are dosing patients every single week. So we've rapidly moved from this being kind of theoretical when I joined the company 6 years ago, and then raised about $97 million in the public markets 5 years ago, to now being a real thing. We're dosing patients in Japan, in Taiwan, in the United States. We may even expand to a couple of other countries to prove out these trials. But our job is to create molecules that can actually solve or help change the outcome for patients. And that's what we're focused on.
Wow, that's outstanding. And I appreciate you giving us that insight. And as I pointed out at the beginning, we have a full profile at the Investor Brand Network, and it talks about Lantern Pharma's AI-driven radar, which integrates over 200 billion. And that's a hard number to wrap your mind around. Oncology specific data points, and underpins every stage of its precision oncology pipeline. So the company has 3 leading drug candidates, which you just pointed out for us. Appreciate that for you. I've watched several videos about you and your company, and I've seen, I've learned actually through watching those videos with yourself that the AI-driven market, or the AI-driven technology that you're using, we talked about this, within our own meetings. It's sort of like when you talk about an athlete, bigger, faster, stronger. But, when I look at what you're doing, it also sharpens your focus. Is that a fair assessment as well?
Yes, absolutely. And part of that is the system, but part of it that is also is people sitting on top of the data and the algorithms. So a lot of the sharpening and the improvement in precision comes from the feedback loop, human in the loop. And it comes from taking the data from the lab and taking data from trials and feeding that back into the system. And that's how you really sharpen systems. As opposed to the system just grabbing information and spitting out results, you want to take those results and then benchmark them against reality and see what's working where, what's not working where. What's a higher value output, what's a lower value output. Should the model be refined? And so that human in the loop, that expert in the loop, to iterate is really an essential problem area for a lot of companies in health. They're not using those iterative cycles and those humans in the loop as much as maybe they could. And also, we're only focused on cancer. So a lot of companies, they try to focus on a wide range of diseases. And that's really hard, because it's not that systems are limited, but it's really our ability to create great systems is limited, and the data quality. So we don't just suck in the data. We then spend time curating it, meta tagging it, giving it a grade, like based on the quality of the data, so that each data set has a quality score. And so that forces you to think, how is this data going to be used or not used? What data sets belong together? So that curation process is very essential. And then also understanding, is the output of the models biologically valid? Is it relevant? Is it something that I can sharpen, as you pointed out, in later stages? And oftentimes, as everyone knows, especially in biological sciences and life sciences, the difference between real world and theory can be very extreme. And so you really have to keep that in mind. And that's the only way to create great medicines, So it's very exciting. Like I said, we've got 3 great, exciting drugs. Any one of those drugs can be worth 5, 10, 25 times our market cap today. So we've got multiple shots on goal. But we also still have other exciting engines of value. And so the way I like to think about it is that we're a highly productive, highly efficient team focused on just the creation of cancer medicines and pointing those cancer medicines to the right cancers, to the right patient profiles, with the right potential additional drugs to be combined with. So these are all problems. And so we've got our current generation of drugs, but we also have new generation of drugs that's preclinical. And we also have created an exciting new company. So this company wouldn't have existed. Just our ideas around it came around about 3.5 years ago. About 2.5 years ago, we created a new company totally focused only on brain cancers. And so the next 5 to 7 years, I see this as an era where many of the most difficult cancers, specifically brain cancers, we're going to start solving for. So we recently announced a new board member who came from a brain cancer company that just got acquired, and actually their drug just got approved this week. So it's great result for Lee Shallop and his company. But that was actually one of 3 brain cancer drugs that's been approved in the last 12, 14 months. And the 17 years before that, no brain cancer drugs have been approved. So we're entering a new era now in precision neuro-oncology. And so our company, we created Starlight, thinking about this phenomenon, thinking about one of our drugs, STAR-001, which has a lot of activity across a big range of brain cancers, both adult and pediatric. We actually have fast track designation in it. We actually have 2 pediatric rare disease designations, and we're launching those into phase 1B, phase 2 trials later this year, early next year. And that'll be a spin-out company called Starlight Therapeutics, which is totally created from data. I mean, that company's idea really came from thinking about a molecule and thinking about where does it work best, and then realizing the opportunity is much bigger than just Lantern alone. So you can go faster, you can go further. And so that's what we're spinning it out into Starlight Therapeutics. So that's the kind of productivity that you can see if you have data, you use AI for good, and you constantly iterate. We have Lantern, we've got a great portfolio, we have got a lot of upcoming milestones. And then we've got Starlight, which is a totally new company that wouldn't have existed. And then we have the third engine of value, which is the AI platform, RADR. And that continues to grow as well. So we've got multiple ways to create value for patients and also, very importantly, for our shareholders.
Well, and you just laid it out for us. I mean, that really plays into my next question. You truly are a company on the rise, and doing so by leveraging AI technology and sharpening that focus. And you also laid out for us really kind of where you have developed along the line here in 2024, 2025, in terms of the FDA process, which for someone sitting on the outside can become, well, I mean, obviously for you dealing with it's cumbersome to say the least. Any update on how things have developed in 2025 further than what you just gave us with the FDA?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are very nervous with, whenever there's changes. I happen to look at it with a little bit more of a pragmatic and maybe potentially positive spin. I do think that the current commissioner and some of his key people want to use AI. They've explicitly said that. And the FDA traditionally has been kind of a old boys kind of network club. So I think changing that will probably result in positive changes for our industry. No one likes change, but I think change is needed. We need to get drugs out faster. We need to use AI for the internal operations of the FDA, which Commissioner Macri has laid out very clearly that they're going to do. That should speed up the process. And I also think that they're going to create, and have stated publicly, they're going to create pathways for rare diseases to get approved. And Stuart, as you know, many of our drugs are for rare cancers, right? Cancers that don't have an option today or have very few options, like one of our drugs for never smokers, people who do not smoke, but get lung cancer. That's a disease that's on the rise. There's no approved therapies. So I think getting the FDA to think about how do we get those drugs without the traditional burden that we've often had on trials post safety. Of course, first and foremost is safety. But once your drug is safe, then what? Is it effective? If we can show it's effective, then do we really need to spend another 3 to 5 years in trials if there's no approved therapy? So there's a lot of, I think, potential movement in the FDA to do things more pragmatically, to use data, and to think more aggressively about, the U.S. continuing to maintain a top position in terms of our ability to create new medicines. So I'm positive. I mean, we can all be wrong about how we think about things, but I like to try to stay positive and pragmatic.
Well, then focusing on that and really kind of coupling that with the thought that even the FDA now is being more open to this and using it themselves to do their job even more efficiently, where do you see breakthroughs coming in the months and years ahead when it relates to how AI impacts your specific fields?
Oh, I think it's going to be just absolutely transformative. I mean, 5 years ago, you had probably less than 10% of big pharma thinking about AI and data first approaches. It was ideas. I think now, from what I read from the major analysts and going to conferences, out of the top 100 pharmas, well over 50 and closer to 70% have begun efforts in using AI and data to actually accelerate or sharpen or do drug development. That's a game changer. So I think over the next 10 years, as the current wave of scientists and managers retires or changes, you're going to have a new wave of people who have been doing and using AI from the first day. And that's how change happens in an industry. You need the technology to be there and available, but then you need the generation of leaders to accept it and drive it through the organization. So I think that's going to happen in the industry. Second, I think the pace of drug development will actually quicken. I don't think it's going to take $1 billion to $2 billion as it has in the past to create a new cancer drug. I think that's going to drop and drop and drop. And so I see, potentially 80% drop in the cost of doing trials and a 50% drop in the time frame. And obviously that drop in cost and time will hopefully be a massive benefit to patients and reduce drug prices and more drug choices. And, like we see in the rest of the economy, the only way to drive change in cost is to have more choice and to actually do things cheaper. You can't just mandate, hey, everybody cut their drug prices by 15%. That's just not the way the real world works. I mean, there are definitely some times where you want price controls over certain things. You don't want price gouging. But, the vast majority, 90% of pharma they're not price gougers. There's always bad actors, but I think the only way to drive change in price is to drive change in the cost. And that's what AI and advanced automation and technology offers us. And at the same time, the pace of creating new drugs and the number of drug choices is going to increase. And that's only good. Like I said, a great example is in precision neuro-oncology. It's a term I'm using, I'm trying to popularize also. Precision neuro-oncology didn't exist because there are only a handful of drugs for brain cancer. Most of them not that great. Like I said, in the last 5-6 quarters, we've now had 3 new drugs. 3. I think in the next 5 to 7 years, you're going to have a blockbuster of new therapies and combination therapies in brain cancer. And so we're going to be able to change the future of brain cancer, which has been an intractable problem. Just think about breast cancer. I know a lot of people are affected by breast cancer. 25 years ago, breast cancer was like a death sentence and people didn't talk about it. Fast forward to today, 2025, women are living 20 years plus with breast cancer. We understand that there are 20, 25 different subtypes of breast cancer, ER positive, HR positive, HER2, triple negative. And all these different types of breast cancer are genomically very different. They require different drugs. They require different treatments. They require different interventions. So the whole biology of breast cancer has totally changed because of data and high-def biology. And that's translated into better drugs, more drugs, and that allows us to transform breast cancer. The same thing is happening right now with lung cancer, although mostly for smokers. And I think the same thing is going to happen in brain cancer. Each of these cancers, one at a time, we're going to be able to tackle. And it's going to happen faster, 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 and cheaper. And so I think that's going to be a really positive thing for the industry. It's going to be a positive thing for patients. And it's going to be all on the back of large-scale AI and data pushing this transformation.
Well, this has been an excellent interview, and I want to thank you once again for your time. But before I let you go, you've talked about the maniacal focus of your team, and I love that expression. And I want to kind of and you've talked about what you've been able to do with the 3 drugs in the past 4 to 5 quarters. But let's talk about 2025 and the remainder of 2025. Operationally, you are the president, CEO, and director of a public company. Again, as I mentioned at the outset, viewers and listeners, ticker symbol LTRN. So on the public company side of things, as well as your company and the internal developments and milestones you've been able to reach, what do you see 2025 shaping up as?
Yeah, we've got some very exciting milestones. We'll have a lot of news flow as we've had over the last few months. Our trial for LP-184, which is kind of a blockbuster potential drug, we expect that trial to be fully enrolled, and we'll have data from that. That's a drug that has $10 to $15 billion in potential annual sales, lots of potential opportunity across a big range of cancers. So we'll have data from that trial. We'll also have data from our LP-300 trial, the trial that's focused on never smokers who get lung cancer. We'll have updates on our brain cancer company, Starlight. We also will have updates on LP-284, which is our drug for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So across our entire platform of drugs, we will have updates, and also updates on our AI platform. We just launched the very first module publicly called Predict BBB, which is the ability for the AI to predict whether a molecule can cross the blood-brain barrier. It's very important in drug development. So there are like 9, 10 different very specific questions in drug development, like combination theory, what indications, will the drug be safe, how safe will it be, where will it cause adverse reactions. So these are all modules that we'll be launching publicly for all drug developers. So again, as I like to think about the engines for growth, we're going to have a lot of data from our trials. We're going to have updates from our second engine, which is the AI platform. And we'll also have updates with Starlight, which is our CNS cancer company. So I think all 3 engines will be firing along and shareholders will be getting updates.
Outstanding. Well, what a great time to do our first interview with you, Panna. I appreciate your time once again. We expect great things for you and your company here in 2025 and well beyond. We look forward to checking back in with you later this year or early in 2026. Thanks for your time, Panna.
Thank you, Stuart. Have a great afternoon.
You as well. For Panna Sharma, this is Stuart Smith saying thanks so much for tuning in.
The BioMedWire Podcast is an original content production powered by IBN, a multifaceted financial news and publishing company that delivers next-generation corporate communication solutions. Utilizing proprietary corporate communication tools such as news aggregation and syndication, social communication, and brand awareness techniques, among others, IBN introduces both public and private companies to diverse audiences to enhance reach and recognition. IBN may receive compensation for services and solutions provided to its client partners. You should assume that the owners, officers, and directors of IBN or financial analysts mentioned in this production may hold a position in and may intend to trade the securities in their own accounts. This production is not an offer or recommendation to buy or sell any securities that may be mentioned in this production. The information in this broadcast is presented solely for informative purposes and is not intended to be or should it be construed as investment advice. As in all investments, investment in the featured companies carries inherent investment risk. Listeners should review the companies thoroughly with a registered investment advisor or registered stockbroker. This production by IBN is not purported to be a complete study of the featured company or other companies mentioned. Information used in statements of fact have been obtained from featured companies and other sources but not verified nor guaranteed by IBN as to completeness and accuracy. Such information is subject to change without notice. Please see IBN's full disclaimers and disclosures at www.ibn.fm/disclaimer. Music in this episode is by Infraction. For more, visit inaudio.org.